You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. In 1683, a scheme known as the Rye House Plot aimed to take the lives of King Charles II and his sibling James, the Duke of York, who was next in line for the English throne. The royal siblings were scheduled to travel from Westminster to Newmarket for horse racing events and to journey back on April 1st. However, a significant fire ravaged Newmarket on March 22nd, forcing them to cancel the races and return to London earlier than planned, which inadvertently thwarted the assassination attempt. The extent to which the plot to kill the king and duke was developed is a matter of debate among historians. Regardless of the assassination plan's progress, certain political dissidents in England were contemplating overthrowing the Stuart monarchy. The government's response to this threat was severe, featuring show trials, oppressive tactics, and aggressive searches for weapons. The Rye House Plot might have played a role in bringing about the 1685 insurgencies, notably the Monmouth Rebellion and Argyll's Rising. Background. Following Charles II's ascension to the British throne in 1660, there was rising unease among some lawmakers, former advocates of the Commonwealth, and the Protestant community due to the perceived close ties Charles maintained with France's Louis XIV and other Catholic monarchs across Europe. Anti-Catholicism was rampant, driven by fears that Catholicism aligned with authoritarian rule. This unease was particularly acute regarding who would follow Charles on the throne. Although Charles professed adherence to the Church of England, he and his brother James were suspected of harboring Catholic leanings, a notion which gained credibility when James's conversion to Catholicism became public knowledge in 1673. The anxiety culminated in 1681 when opponents of this relationship concocted the so-called Popish Plot and pushed forward a legislative proposal known as the Exclusion Bill in the House of Commons, aiming to bar James from ascending the throne. However, Charles II adeptly navigated this political challenge by dissolving what came to be known as the Oxford Parliament, effectively foiling any legal efforts to alter the line of succession. Amid rampant speculation of insurrection and conspiracy, the fractured opposition found themselves short of options. Prominent figures opposing Charles's policies, including Lord Melville, Lord Leven, and the notable Lord Shaftesbury, fled Britain for Holland, where Shaftesbury passed away. The opposition, which would later be recognized as the Whigs, a label that would endure, counted many distinguished Parliament members and nobles among its ranks. The plot. Rye House was an ancient, fortified manor with a moat situated in the northeastern area of Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire. The property was rented by a former soldier of the Civil War named Richard Rumbold, who held Republican beliefs. There was a scheme devised by a radical faction of the Whig Party, now identified with this conspiracy and known as the Rye House Plotters. They intended to hide soldiers within the estate's boundaries and launch an assault on the king and his brother, the Duke, during their trip back to London from the horse racing event at Newmarket. Among several strategies, this particular plan was chosen because it offered strategic advantages and could be executed by a small number of men with firearms, taking advantage of the cover provided by the house's location. The royal entourage's journey was scheduled for April 1st, 1683. However, an extensive fire broke out on March 22nd in Newmarket, destroying much of the town. This incident led to the cancellation of the races, and the king and duke returned to London sooner than expected, unintentionally foiling the planned ambush before it could occur. The Rye House and other plotters. During the late 17th century in Britain, a significant number of individuals known as conspirators entertained the idea of taking up arms, particularly amongst political circles identified with the Whigs. They were conflicted about how to approach this armed rebellion, with plans varying from taking over cities other than the capital, such as Bristol, to inciting an insurrection in Scotland. The recording and interpretation of the events surrounding what became known as the plot were significantly influenced by political biases, and even now historians are working to determine the identities and roles of those intimately connected with the plans for violent overthrow. At the heart of the assassination conspiracy was a core group formed around 1682-1683 by Robert West, a lawyer and member of the Green Ribbon Club. This group came to be known as the Rye House Cabal. West was previously involved in the notorious Popish plot through his dealings with the false accuser Stephen College. This connection led him to meet Aaron Smith and William Hone, who were part of the conspiracy but not central figures. Influential philosopher John Locke was tangentially connected, having helped West find lodgings and being acquainted with other involved parties such as Smith, John Aloff, Christopher Battiscombe, and Israel Hayes. Among these, Aloff was definitely implicated in what is known as the Rye House Plot, which by extension left Locke in a precarious position. Richard Rumbold, another conspirator, was introduced to West's circle by John Wildman. However, when the plot unraveled, both Rumbold and Wildman had retreated from their prior commitments, Wildman by withdrawing financial support for buying arms, and Rumbold because he had lost his initial zeal for the cause. The Uprising plans. Richard Nelthorpe and others in his faction preferred inciting an uprising to planning an assassination. These individuals were part of a group primarily influenced by Algernon Sidney and other high-status members affiliated with the political faction known as the Country Party, which also made up the inner circle associated with the Duke of Monmouth. In September 1682, there were talks among Monmouth's group about organizing a rebellion, and these individuals also had connections with the West Circle. This faction went on to be called the Council of Six, following the Tory party's victories in the summer of 1682, which determined who had authority in the City of London. Their strategy included recruiting Archibald Campbell, the 9th Earl of Argyll, to lead a revolt in Scotland. Smith was dispatched in January 1683 to rally support in Scotland for this council, intending to gather the supporters in London. However, his mission failed due to his inability to keep the plan confidential. West's understanding of the Monmouth Group's plans was partially based on second-hand information. Thomas Walcott and Robert Ferguson, after accompanying the Earl of Shaftesbury to the Netherlands during his voluntary exile in November 1682, returned to London and connected with West. Through Walcott, West became aware of Shaftesbury's broader ambition for a widespread rebellion. Walcott specified his readiness to lead an offensive against the Royal Guards, but he, like others, drew the line at assassination. As the spring of 1683 unfolded, there were additional exchanges between Monmouth's group and the West Circle regarding the creation of a public declaration, especially through Sir Thomas Armstrong. These talks surfaced disagreements over whether the outcome of their revolutionary actions should be a republic or a monarchy. By May 1683, West and Walcott were contemplating with others the possibility of assembling an armed force of thousands near London. Scottish and American connections. Understanding the true motives of the Whigs during this period is made more complex by their involvement in colonial ventures in America. West had investments in East Jersey, while Shaftesbury was deeply engaged with the colony of Carolina. In April of 1683, several Scottish associates of the Whigs, who had been briefed by Smith, showed up in London and connected with Essex and Russell, who were part of the Monmouth Group. It seemed to some that their business was related to Carolina, or at least that was the reason they gave for their visit. This group included notables like Sir George Campbell of Cessnock, John Cochrane, and William Carstairs. Although the Earl of Argyll had moved from London to the Netherlands in August of the previous year, he maintained contact with prominent Whigs using messengers and encoded messages. Two of these messengers, William Spence, who also went by the name Butler, and Abraham Holmes, were captured in June 1683. Informers and arrests. The revelation of the conspiracy came to light after Josiah Keeling informed Sir Leoline Jenkins about it, leading to its exposure on June 12, 1683. Keeling first approached a member of the court, who then connected him with George Legge, 1st Baron Dartmouth. Dartmouth then facilitated Keeling's encounter with Jenkins, the Secretary of State. Keeling's information played a pivotal role in the legal proceedings against Walcott, Hone, Sidney, and Charles Bateman, and his cooperation resulted in a pardon. This initiated a cascade of admissions from implicated individuals hoping for leniency. Keeling's brother gathered additional proof of the plot, and Jenkins soon questioned Rumsey and West, who began divulging details starting June 23 to 22 for West, who had proactively offered information through Lawrence Hyde, 1st Earl of Rochester. Over a series of days, West unraveled the Rye House Plot and described his role in acquiring weapons, purportedly for export to America. His words barely dragged the Monmouth affiliates into the matter. Nonetheless, his testimony would later contribute to the cases against Walcott and Sidney. West was pardoned in December 1684. Thomas Walcott, one of the schemers, was detained on July 8th and was the first to be brought to court. Conspirators had convened at his residence on June 18th. Refusing to flee, he contacted Jenkins, proposing a full disclosure in exchange for clemency. John Roe of Bristol, linked to the Monmouth household, was deemed a weak link among the conspirators. Steps were taken to silence him, and he faced multiple threats against his life. After the June 18th meeting, Nelthorpe and Edward Norton proposed immediate rebellion to William Russell, Lord Russell, who declined. Subsequently, Nelthorpe fled the nation. Walcott exposed Henry Kerr, the publisher of the anti-Catholic and Whig-oriented weekly Paquet. Upon ceasing publication on July 13th, Kerr began to collaborate with the authorities. Zachary Bourne, another plotter nabbed trying to depart England with nonconformist ministers, implicated others, including Minister Stephen Lobb, who was positioned to assist in recruitment for a revolt. Following an order on July 6th, Lobb was detained in August. On July 27th, a royal proclamation condemned the atrocity of the conspiracy, leading to further arrests. Though the pivotal conspirator figures were relatively insignificant and disconnected from the Monmouth cabal, the ruling party failed to distinguish between the subgroups. The clergy involved might have been acquainted with Ferguson, but not West. Meade, for instance, had given refuge to a rebel and was likely aware of insurgents' plans. William Carstairs, a Scottish clergyman engaged with the Whig elites, was found in Kent on July 23rd. Trials and aftermath. In my own words, here's a summary of the historical events you described. Several individuals were executed by being hanged, drawn, and quartered due to their involvement in political uprisings or alleged plots. These included Sir Thomas Armstrong, an MP for Stafford, John Aloff, who participated in Argyll's Rising, Henry Cornish, who was a sheriff of London, along with James Holloway, John Rouse, and Thomas Walcott. Richard Nelthorpe and Bailey of Jerviswood were executed by hanging, and Richard Rumbold was also executed for his part in Argyll's Rising. In contrast, Elizabeth Gaunt was executed by being burned at the stake. Notably, William Russell, an MP and a Whig martyr, and Algernon Sidney, a former prominent official, were both beheaded. A few individuals, such as Charles Gerard, the 1st Earl of Macclesfield, and his son, were given death sentences but were subsequently pardoned. Others faced imprisonment, and some of them were also heavily fined, like Sir Samuel Barnardiston and John Hampden, an MP. William Howard played a crucial role as an informant in the trials of his peers. A group of individuals, including MPs and nobles, such as Sir John Trenchard and Henry Booth, were also imprisoned. Meanwhile, a number of people chose to leave the country, fleeing to the Dutch Republic or France to escape persecution. This group included notable figures like philosophers and nobility, such as John Locke and several earls. Arthur Capel, the 1st Earl of Essex, tragically ended his own life by cutting his throat while detained and awaiting trial in the Tower of London. William Carstairs endured torture, and a number of people were implicated in the various plots and uprisings, such as Archibald Campbell and James Scott, the latter being a royal illegitimate son who was eventually executed. Charles Bateman was the last person tried and executed on the charges related to the Rye House Plot, while Sir William Waller, an exile, played a central role among the political exiles and later joined William of Orange during the invasion that initiated the Glorious Revolution. Historians like Richard Greaves and Doreen Milne have debated the true extent and nature of the Rye House Plot, suggesting it could have been exaggerated to justify political purges. The government's subsequent harsh actions, known as the Stuart Revenge, created public discontent, leading to the pivotal Glorious Revolution of 1688, which reshaped the British political landscape.